believe what a lousy job our media are doing reporting what the judge just did in Florida. It's absolutely outrageous. I'm Mark Levin. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I just heard a report that said the judge said the Obama administration can go forward and implement Obamacare and that the matter will be decided by the Supreme Court. Well, that's not exactly what he did. Do the media actually read these opinions before they talk about them? I have been right all along on what Judge Vinson did. And Judge Vinson very pointedly and even sarcastically warned the federal government that it was on thin ice. He warned the administration that it was on thin ice. Now, Hans von Spakovsky and Todd Gaziano at the Heritage Foundation, they, like me, read the 20-some-odd page decision by the judge. After waiting more than 2 weeks, the Obama administration filed an insulting motion that essentially said the federal government would not comply with the judge's judgment unless Judge Vinson issued another order clarifying that he really meant what he said. That is, that the executive branch was enjoined from implementing this unconstitutional Obamacare law. It was a political motion, not a legal motion, that any serious litigator would file. In fact, Judge Vinson said if the government was really unable to understand his original order, quote, it was not expected that they would effectively ignore the order and declaratory judgment for 2.5 weeks, continue to implement the act, and only then file a belated motion to clarify. Exactly what I've been saying. Vinson indirectly pointed out the administration's bad faith when he noted that DOJ lawyers said in their reply brief that the reason for the delay was because the judge's order needed careful analysis. Yet the judge wrote, this was contrary to media reports that the White House declared within hours after the entry of his order that implementation would proceed apace regardless of the ruling. Remember that? Judge Vinson also wrote that the government's legal citation in its most recent motion borders on misrepresentation. This lawless, pathetic bunch of hack lawyers working over at the Justice Department should have their tickets yanked. So today Vinson reaffirmed, I want ABC Radio News, please listen. He reaffirmed that he meant it when he said the law was unconstitutional and that he had expected the executive branch to abide by his decision. Vinson said the language in his original order, quote, seems to be plain and unambiguous, even though I expressly declared that the entire act was void, and even though I emphasized that separate injunctive relief is not necessary, only because it must be presumed that the executive branch will adhere to the law as declared by the court, which means that declaratory judgment is the functional equivalent of an injunction. The defendants, meaning the government, have indicated they do not interpret the court's order as requiring them to immediately cease implementing and enforcing the act. The judge was obviously annoyed. The government has reportedly continued with full implementation. He went on to clarify, quote unquote, his order that he expected his declaratory judgment to be treated as the practical and functional equivalent of an injunction. Exactly what he said in his original ruling on page 75. Now, the plaintiffs had asked the judge to treat the Justice Department's motion to clarify as a motion for a stay and to deny the motion. Judge Vinson did treat the motion to clarify as a motion to stay, his earlier judgment, but here's the point the media don't get, but now you will. But then he offered a clever compromise to the Obama administration. Listen to this. He granted a stay for 7 days, but only on the condition that the Obama administration file an appeal within that period that requests expedited appellate review, either in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit or the Supreme Court. The judge also noted the appeal could be expedited because the briefing on the underlying legal issues was already submitted to his court. What the media are not understanding is this judge is pissed. What he said is, okay, I'll stay my decision, but for only 7 days, and only if you, the Obama administration, file an expedited appeal and seek an expedited ruling from either the 11th Circuit or the United States Supreme Court. In other words, He trumped them. This is a serious strategic loss for the government. Vinson has challenged the federal government to speed up the appeals process, which would normally take much longer, forcing the hand of the administration, which would like to slow down the litigation through questionably legal tactics if it can get away with it, so it can implement as much of Obamacare as possible before it gets to the Supreme Court. He's not going to allow that. He trumped them. It's also a clever suggestion to the appellate courts that will next hear these claims. The administration's dilatory tactics should not trump the rule of law, and as Judge Vinson correctly observed, writes the guys at the Heritage Foundation, it is very important to everyone in this country that this case move forward as soon as practically possible. Important to everyone except the Obama administration. Okay, to recap, for the slow learners in the media out there, what the judge did is he rammed this decision down Obama's throat, legally speaking. They bought themselves 7 days only, if they request an expedited appeal, expedited appellate review either by the 11th Circuit, that Court of Appeals, or the U.S. Supreme Court. And if they don't, they have to stop implementing Obamacare. So when you hear a news person say that the judge stayed his opinion and said the Supreme Court's going to have to decide, look at all the content, all the substance that they ignored. They ignored the judge's opinion. They went with the spin. This was a great ruling by this judge. He's now forcing them to move quickly because he's ticked off that they played games with the rules of procedure, that they filed a political motion, and I told you at the time it was a nonsensical motion, and that they're screwing with him. And so he's smiling. Okay, I'll give you 7 days. 7 days to expedite your case, or you shut down Obamacare. That's a victory, ladies and gentlemen. That's not a defeat. It's not even a close call. And yet if you listen to the reporters, the government won. No, they lost, and they lost badly. And their tactics backfired on them, and they were called out on them. The tactics we've been talking about here day after day. I wasn't going to start with that, but after I heard the news reporting, I said, I got to resolve this, address it as quickly as possible, or people are going to think that this judge did something that he didn't actually do. If I'm a Justice Department lawyer now who is involved in this case, I am concerned. I'm not happy. And if they're concerned and not happy, we're thrilled, and we're doing a dance. Sherrod Brown, I know it's Sherrod Brown, we'll call Sherrod Brown, a senator from Ohio, a Democrat, huge leftist. He was on the Senate floor today, and just like little Dick Durbin in dealing with Gitmo, bringing up Hitler and Stalin and so forth. And remember, they tell us not to bring up Hitler and Stalin, but they bring it up all the time, them up all the time. There he is on the Senate floor, and somehow he's able to bring up Hitler and Stalin with respect to what's going on in Wisconsin. Cut 5, go.
As a nation, you know, I look back in history, in some of the worst governments we've ever had. You know that one of the first things they did? They went after the trade unions. Hitler didn't want unions. Stalin didn't want unions. Mubarak didn't want independent unions. These autocrats in history don't want independent unions. So when I see an Egypt...
Stop. Rewind him. What we're talking about in government unions is not independent unions, are we? These government unions, particularly the National Education Association, which I've been calling out day in and day out, and AFT, its little sister, those two unions have bought and paid for the Democrat Party, and the Democrat Party have bought and paid for those two unions. They're not independent. They're not independent. So let's get the language straight. Remember, I've always told you, when you listen to these leftists, listen carefully to what they say and how they say it. Because you might just gloss over, okay, the independent, the unions. No, he said independent unions. Because these tyrannies have unions, headed by thugs, brown shirts, who go out and enforce the government's will. So it's not that these tyrannies are without unions. They're without independent unions. And the government unions, the NEA and so forth, they're not independent unions. They're part of the Democrat Party in form and in practice, even though the IRS gives them a different sheet of paper. Now, let's go back to Sherrod Brown, Democrat, Ohio. Cut 5, go.
As a nation, you know, I look back in history, in some of the worst governments we've ever had. You know that one of the first things they did? They went after the trade unions. Hitler didn't want unions. Stalin didn't want unions. Mubarak didn't want independent unions. These autocrats in history don't want independent unions. So when I see in Egypt, or if I see in the old Soviet Russia, or I see in history tells me about Germany, I'm not comparing what's happening to the workers in Madison or in Columbus to Hitler and Stalin. But I am saying that history teaches us that unions are a very positive force in society that creates a middle class and that protects our freedom.
Why do more and more Democrats sound like Charlie Rangel? That's my first question. Now, let me educate you, you big dummy. Hitler, Stalin, they destroy the individual. They're at war with the individual. They want to remake society and they want to remake humanity. You don't even understand what these men did and why they did it. They centralize power, Senator, just as you love centralizing power. They did have unions. They weren't independent. They gave them brown shirts. They would go into these massive halls where they'd get all worked up and then go out in the streets and break necks and windows and burn things. These people would undermine the rule of law. They would reject history and tradition and experience in these societies, just as we are. They believed in crony capitalism and National Socialism. Do you believe in those things, Senator? Crony capitalism and National Socialism? Don't try and rewrite history and think you're going to get away with it. Your comments are disgusting. Now, more facts, Senator. If the people of Wisconsin elect a governor and a state legislature that wants to limit the collective bargaining abilities of public sector unions apart from the police and firefighters, how is that taking away a union? It's not taking away a union. The unions still exist. What it takes away is their ability to wash money through their campaign coffers and put them into yours. That's what you're really upset about. You don't mind centralizing power. You don't mind government-related unions to do your dirty work. You don't mind violations of the rule of law. You don't mind centralizing authority or any of those great things, do you, Senator? And we started it here, and we will repeat it as we were the ones that launched this point, and I will continue to launch it so all the backbenchers keep repeating it, because I was in the Reagan administration, and I remembered that federal employees don't have collective bargaining rights. Yes, we started that point right here. And this senator is not even proposing them. Does that make our government like Hitler and Stalin? We'll be right back. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel estimates that the damage done to the Capitol building in Madison, Wisconsin, $7.5 million. Most of it on the marble inside the building. $7.5 million. I wonder what Hitler and Stalin would do. Let's turn to our Hitler and Stalin expert, the Democrat Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio.